Hello, Soul Sync Podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, this next episode, I must admit, first of all, when I first spoke to this guest, I was blown away by the amount of synchronicities that seem to be occurring throughout the course of the episode, because in the days before talking to this guest, a lot of this information seemed to have landed on my lap, and I suddenly became very interested in a lot of what this guest was talking about. So you'll notice my mind was blown by what he was talking about, but my mind was also blown by the amount of synchronicities that kept coming up. Now, we talked, me and this next guest, about everything from the different realms of consciousness, the celestial layer, dragons, the soul rescue work that he does, where he goes down to different levels of consciousness and rescues fragments of souls. We also talked about soul contracts and renegotiating your soul contracts. It was so interesting. So get ready, Soul Sync, to embark on a mystical and enchanting journey as we introduce our esteemed guest onto the Soul Sync podcast, Kieron Morgan. Now, Kieron is a man who's been walking the spiritual path for over 2 decades, leaving a trail of magic and wisdom in his wake. Kieron's journey began in the realm of a technical theatre where he worked as a theatre manager, yet his heart was drawn to the realms of magic and wonder, especially the awe-inspiring world of dragons. Over 2 years ago, Kieron was initiated into the mystical world of spirit. One of the first messages he received from his guides referred to him as Little Red Dragon. However, as he honed his skills and deepened his connection, he earned the title of Brother from his spirit guides. Kieron's spiritual journey doesn't just end with dragons. He proudly works with the old gods from both the Albion and Viking mythology, championing these ancient energies that are still vital to our land and form an integral part of our energetic heritage. Now, despite his imposing appearance as a big, bearded man, Kieron's personality exudes gentleness and calmness, and he is known as a gentle giant in the spiritual community. If you share a fascination for dragons or wish to know more about these magnificent creatures, you're in for a treat. Kieron provides insights and knowledge that will ignite your imagination and spirit. I so love this conversation, and I'm sure you will do too. Enjoy. So, Kieron, thank you so much for coming onto the Soul Sync podcast.
You're welcome. It's great to be here. Great to have the opportunity to have a chat and say hello and share some ideas and thoughts.
Fantastic. So in your introduction, I must admit, I found it absolutely gripping to write your introduction because there was so much there that really piqued my curiosity. And I think we're going to have an action-packed hour here. So to begin with, I always like to ask guests to just give us a flavour of how you've come to be where you are, maybe some pivotal moments, so we can kind of get a bit of context as to you, first of all.
Okay. So I was a very strange kid. I'm a very strange adult, but I was an even more strange kid. I could see the spirit from a very early age. I could talk with them, elemental realms as well. We would wander around the garden where I used to live, talking and chatting with them, and my sister was similar. So my mum would occasionally ask, what are you doing? Oh, I'm talking to the man in the black hat. Who's the man in the black hat? Oh, can you not? I mean, I would go, he's talking to Kirsty, he's talking to my sister. And that would be obvious. And luckily, my mum was quite, oh, well, that's okay, that's nice, isn't that lovely? Rather than lots of parents whose kids say that type of thing, that take them off to be tested.
Yes.
And or give them a lot of drugs and things like that. So I was obsessed with science fiction and fantasy books as well as a kid. I was an avid reader, and one of the things that never really made sense to me was that in lots of the books, the dragons always seemed to be grumpy and nasty and upset and the villains of the piece, until I saw The Neverending Story with Falcor the Luck Dragon. Mm-hmm. And he was very happy, laughing, kind dragon. I thought, oh, that's the type of dragon that I want to know more about, which is cool. Being very energetically sensitive was quite challenging at school, because I could, even though I didn't know that that's what it was, I would get very affected by the school environments would be very overwhelming, and I find being in crowded places something I wanted to do but quite challenging as well. It's almost like an addiction. You sort of something's bad for you, but you want to do it anyway, sort of thing. when I was about 19 or so, I spent a year at university basically drinking a lot and partying and not really doing a lot of work, and I ended up having a breakdown. But it wasn't actually, I don't call it a breakdown now, I call it a breakthrough, because whatever I was going through at the time, I couldn't cope with it. I dropped out of university, and I spent about 6 months wandering around the forest where I used to live up on Leith Hill, which is a very beautiful place and has now become the violet flame chakra for the world, which is probably a whole other discussion. It's an energetic center, similar to Mount Shasta and Uluru and Glastonbury, which is near where we live now. And I'm very lucky to be guardian of that place, the energetic guardian of that.
I was in Glastonbury today, funnily enough.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was. Yes, I've not long got back.
Oh, well, we probably passed each other
Yeah.
because I drive around there regularly. So that was sort of 1920, and then lots of things got shut down. In my mid-30s or early 30s, things started to open up. So my dad passed, bless him, 26 years ago now, and I had another sort of breakthrough, and then a friend of, my sister actually said, go and see a friend of her best friend's mum, have a reading, which I hadn't done before, and I thought, I had a bit of a poo-pooing situation. I was just thinking, oh, that's just nonsense and lovely, but, well, why not? Because I was feeling quite lost. Had a reading. She said, lots of the reading I don't really remember, but she said, oh, I'm doing this course about the old Celtic gods, the Canonicus and Merlin and things like that. Come along. And she said, I'm doing this with a guy called Ed Courtney. I was like, okay, cool. So I turned up to this weekend course, one weekend a month for a whole year, I think it was. And I had a very interesting time, very strange time, and lots of things started to shift and to move. And
in what sense?
Well, because I found it odd because there were lots of people there, and we were sort of connecting, or supposed to be connecting, with different energies. And what I found with some people was, and this remains true to this day, when they were invoking, so we got told to call in the quarters, call into the energy of north, south, east, and west, and different energies and different gods, forms and figures. And I found it strange that when some people would do it, I really didn't feel like anything happened.
Peers of yours, within the group.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I first got in there and I sat down, bless me, and I must have looked like a muppet because I had just a Welsh rugby top on. I'm a very proud Welsh descent, although you can't tell from my lovely Southern English.
Do you know what? Funny enough, I was in Wales just the other day. There's a lot of synchronicities here, Kieron, I'm noticing. Yeah. Yes, I like Wales. I go. My partner is Welsh.
Lovely. Yeah, and so I had my little Welsh rugby shirt on, and we went on the first course, which really made me laugh. We laugh now. We went round the circle to introduce ourselves, and the first lady said, "Oh, I am Spingly Hingly Wang Wang Wang, and I am a Reiki master of the 14th level, and 22 of my chakras are open, and I do this, that, and the other, and I've got 15 beautiful crystal points." And the next person came around and said, "Oh, well, actually, I am checking our undertrousers. I have 35 open chakras, and I am a second degree Reiki master."
What does that even mean?
Well, at the time, it didn't mean anything to me, which is...
It didn't mean anything to me. So they were going round the room, and was this making you feel intimidated?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the further the round, the bigger the hair got, the bigger the pentagram got, the more purple flowing lace or velvet there was. And it got around to me, and I went, "Hi, I'm Kieron." And that was it, because I didn't have anything to say. I had no idea what was going on. And these other 20 odd groups of people just turned and looked and went, "But who's that? He's not adorned himself with any crystals, and there doesn't to be any sign of any kind of connection to whatever." So I was quite quiet for a long time, and then it came to one of the sessions when Ed said to me, "Right, I want you to call in Canonicus. When we're going around the circle to call in the quarters, I'd like you to call in Canonicus." And lots of people have done very flowery sort of things, which is lovely and great. But when I called to Canonicus to step forward out of the forest and come close, my whole body started to shake, and I had this real tingle and this real feel like something had happened.
Can I ask you a question? So the group was focusing on the Celtic time and all of the Merlin, that sort of realm of things.
Yeah, there were others as well. It was a sort of old probably an umbrella term would sort of be the old ways rather than, because I hesitate to use the word pagan because people think it's running around naked, cutting heads off chickens type thing.
Yeah.
But it's more of the old ways, the old gods. So yeah, there was Celtic gods there, absolutely, and there was ancient Egyptians and that type of thing. So it was.
What was it that attracted you to that? What made you want to explore that rather than looking at just mediumship as a subject? What kind of pulled you into that?
Well, because my obsession, and I was an obsessive reader. So about 5 years old, I got book. I said to my dad, "I'm bored." We lived in a big house in the middle of nowhere. He said, "Read a book." Standard, go outside. Oh, it's raining. Well, read a book. I said, "I've read all my books." And he said, "Well, go and read one of mine." And I grabbed The Hobbit, apparently, and said, "Do you want to read this one?" And my dad laughed. I went, "Yeah, sure, if you want." And I gave it back to him about a week later and said, "Thanks, can I read another one?" And he went, "You can't have read The Hobbit. You're 5 years old, don't be ridiculous." And I told him what the story was. And he thought to himself, bloody hell, my child is some kind of savant nutcase. But I loved the idea of magic, and I loved the idea of dragons and elves. And because I could see the fairy folk when I was a kid, I'd always been really attracted to the stories of Merlin the Magician, and having Welsh heritage as well, that whole legends of myth and magic, which seem to hail from the Celtic nations very much. And there was something in me that I just, probably even at that point, was thinking about dragons and the energy of Merlin as well.
What is it what is a dragon in simplest forms? Because obviously I know what one is, but what's the spiritual undertone of a dragon? Because I'm not as clued up on this as you can tell.
Dragons are interesting, and the symbolism of it depends on where you are in the world and where you go through history. But generally, they are the embodiment of perseverance, of courage. They can be representations of the alchemical process, personal development and change. Alchemy is changing lead to gold in a physical sense, but it's also spiritually about turning our physical body, our leaden spirit, our downloaded energy into the more divine version of ourselves, or the divine blueprint of what we should be or could be. In Eastern philosophy, dragons were seen as protectors and guides. They loved music and poetry, but they also very powerful protectors. Moving across into Western culture, they were legitimately and demonized by the church when the patriarchal world started to want everyone to believe in one god and try to get rid of the old gods, and the divine feminine was sort of suppressed very much, the old ways. Then they were given the wings, and they were turned into demons, and they were sort of made to be slithering, slimy creatures that would steal your gold and your virginal daughter and the your table and that type of thing. So, but every major culture has had some kind of dragon or serpent or snake type energy associated with it, whether that be the Quetzalcoatl in South America or the great serpent in Aboriginal or traditions and things like that. There are dragons, and they are guardians, and sometimes you see them. So Smaug the dragon, for example, is a big guardian of gold. And they say in the books, but they could only use gold because it's the only thing that won't melt under the fire of a dragon. Having done a bit of a degree in chemistry, I will tell you that gold is a very soft metal, and if the first time a dragon sits down upon it and accidentally belches, that whole gold is turning into a big pool of rivery loveliness. So it's because it's really soft. So it's absolute nonsense. But the gold spiritually represents knowledge and understanding and that type of thing. So the balls of energy they have, the pearls you may see them holding, are just that knowledge and understanding. So they are also guardians of gateways, guardians of making sure that we're ready to move on to the next stage or the next level of awareness.
It's fascinating. Do you know what? I knew a lot of parts of what you said there, but it was really fascinating to ask you that question. So you was in this group, just to go back to that, because I realise that we've gone down a rabbit hole, and you'll notice on this podcast we go down a lot of it could take us a very long time to get to an end story because there's so many twists and turns. So tell us what happened then, how this things went in this group.
Yeah, so I called in Canonites into the quarter, and I really felt something. and I wasn't sure what it was, but my body started to tingle, my hairs and my arms sort of stood up a little bit, and I felt this change, this shift. And it was the type of thing that I had imagined how films and TV that I'd seen at the time, how that shift and changed. And I could, in my mind's eye, my nerdy, geeky film TV brain could imagine this presence appearing etherically and being able to, converse with him, which I couldn't do, but that's how I felt. But we had a few of these sessions, and after one of them, because I was quite quiet doing what I was doing, and after one of the sessions, Ed, who was running it, we were chatting, I was putting the chairs away and stuff, and he asked if I would be interested in doing some work, doing some sort of private lessons, learning lessons sort of thing. And I said, I'd love to, but I can't afford to do anything. He went, oh, no. He said, it's like a kind of apprenticeship type thing. I said, oh, yeah, that sounds lovely. He said, come to workshops, put the chairs out, tick boxes for people that turn up, help me out, and we do some lessons and stuff like that. And I'll show you some of the bits and pieces, the sort of fundamentals of the old ways, I suppose, like creating a safe space, calling the quarters in, the phases of the moon, that type of stuff, how all of that works. And so we started on that, and I was his apprentice and worked with him for 12 years, I think it was, and we become great friends. And we still, spend time together. We keep in touch, and I graduated from the Edwin Courtney School of Wizardry and Witchcraft. I was the only one to graduate, yay me. I'd like to think it's because I was a star pupil. He says it's because it was too much hard work to get anybody else to do it, which is fair enough. But,
your whole world I find fascinating. Do you know what? It was even when I was in Glastonbury today, I kept coming across books, and we were reading a book earlier that we bought there, and I said, I am so excited to speak to Kieron because this is all of your... I find that whole pagan and around that time really interesting, and it's become quite new to me. I've only recently started really finding myself wanting to know a lot about it, and I find it all fascinating. So what happened to you then once you graduated? Where did you go with this, and what was it doing in your life, these experiences?
Well, I became... I worked in different workshops that I was doing. He would talk on a really wide variety of topics. So sometimes it would be the old gods or the Celtic ways of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, or the angels or archangels or the ascended masters. So I got to learn a really big, broad spectrum of those types of things, which was fantastic. And I'm really hugely grateful for being able to. I love a broad-based pyramid to be able to learn from. It was fantastic foundation. But the back end of what we were doing, he sort of said to me, look, you need to get out and start talking to people and teaching people and doing workshops yourself, which scared the bejesus out of me because I am by nature a very quiet, very shy person. I have, in my sort of previous work life, I was a theatre technician and stage manager. So my job was to build stage sets, do the lighting and sound, stay out of the way, put everybody else in the spotlight to make them look good and sound good. So the idea of me standing up in front of people and talking was pretty terrifying, especially going back to when I was 15, 16, because I had a stammer and stutter because of my nervousness, which was so bad I could hardly speak. So when I had that breakthrough, I didn't really speak to people for about 6 months. So there was a lot of silence. There was a lot of fear there. And he said, I said, I don't think I can do that. And I'm not sure that. And at the time, my voice, although it's the same as now, people couldn't hear me. I am very softly spoken, but it doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter how loudly I spoke. People couldn't hear me because I had such a blockage in my throat chakra. It was just so congealed with fear and worry about saying the wrong thing. But he said, well, that's all right. We'll do some work together. We'll run a workshop together and we'll do a workshop on dragons because you love dragons, you have your Welsh flag and everything. I was like, cool. So we put a workshop together. He would do a bit, I would do a bit. He would do guided meditation. I'd play the drum and we would sing together. And one of my great favourite things is that he and I would sing together the old songs and things like that, which was awesome. And so I did a workshop on dragons. People loved it. He's up in Northumberland, so I would come down south, and he would say, every now and again, why don't you do one on your own down here? And so I took the plunge and did, and people quite liked it, and I managed to do some at the College of Psychic Studies as well, which It is an amazing building. I don't know if you've been there, but it is like a Hogwarts. There's
Where is that?
It's in South London.
And what's it called again? Sorry,
the College of Psychic Studies.
Oh, I'll have a look at that. No, I haven't heard of it actually.
So there's some very famous mediums there. Madame Blavatsky worked from there, and others. And one of my favourite stories from there is at the top of the first set of stairs. There's an enormous full-size portrait of an American medium lady. I can't remember her name. But the legend had it that sometimes she's wearing glasses and sometimes she isn't, and sometimes the portrait has a cat in it and sometimes it doesn't. And I just thought this was absolute nuts. I like to think I'm a relatively down-to-earth, feet on the ground type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the times being at workshops, I would look at this portrait and fair enough, sometimes she's wearing glasses, sometimes she isn't. Sometimes there's a cap wrapped around her feet and sometimes there isn't. And it's not like something subtle. These are big glasses, not like quite Dame Edna Everage type glasses, but these are proper full-on glasses and sometimes they're just not there.
I'm certainly going to be looking into that place. I wanted to ask you then, so in kind of, this was a question that came up earlier when me and my partner were looking through one of these books. What's the connection between the old gods and the chambers of the upper world?
Do you know what? I don't know.
Do you not?
I'll give you a simple answer. I don't know. Okay. I don't even know what the chambers of the upper world are. Yes, yeah.
We were reading a book earlier and I thought maybe that's a question for you. We were looking into the realms and sort of the celestial layer and all these different realms, because one of the parts of your experience, from what I understand from what I've read before you come onto the show, is you've got an experience of going through those and going up to that kind of celestial layer. Hello, it's me, Jason Paul. I'm sorry to interrupt your episode for just a moment to ask a brief favour. If you like listening to The Soul Sync, please do leave me a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your feedback really does mean the world to me, and it also ensures that I can continue to bring world-class speakers onto The Soul Sync. Thanks for all your support. I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, I've tried to do that, to connect with the sort of divine aspect of myself, divine aspect of communicating more clearly with the angels or the higher beings, and but equally at the same time, I spend a certain amount of time going into the shadow, going into the lower realms of energy, and I probably spent more time going that way than I have going this way. But my philosophy is that both of them are equally important. Both of them are equally divine. If you take Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose branches go so far up into the sky and roots go so far down into the earth that they end up connecting together, and then the as above, so below thing. And I think in the sort of as Christianity has taken over and taken hold or did in the UK, we were cut off from those shadow realms, the aspects of ourself. We were told that it's all bad down there, everything down here is bad, everything is hellish, it's all horrible, nasty, fire flames, setting fire to your genitals, that type of thing. And this up here is God, and but you can only get up there if Jesus helps you. And but in my experience, that sort of facing our own shadows, our own fears, our worries, our insecurities, in a sort of Luke Skywalker, when Yoda tells him to go into the cave and he faces Darth Vader type thing. When you face those shadows, those fears, and you understand them, then they're incredibly powerful tools. They're incredibly powerful ways to be able to help us understand ourselves and see what blockages there may be or challenges that we've had in previous lifetimes, and be able to then help us to connect more readily with those higher realms.
Why do you spend more time on the lower realms than the higher? Why have you naturally gone in that direction?
I think, in all honesty, I think when I believe that before we just about to incarnate, we set a whole load of things to do, like a to-do list, or agree to do a whole load of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make a note to myself that not to tick the box of the ones that I've ticked in this lifetime, because it's been really bloody hard. But I think I must have ticked that box of working in those realms and trying to help with earthbound spirits being released back into where they should be, working in the realms of purgatory, helping to reclaim soul fragments of people that have been through trauma, because they can get stuck in those realms as well, and get them back to them. I think some of that was because when, with those breakdowns that I had, I became fragmented, and I became like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing, and I took a long time to piece those things together. And I think some of the work that I do is helping people to get those pieces back so they can put themselves back together.
How do you access the different How do you get from realm to realm and know what realm you're in? Or is that I'm asking a very personal question?
With no, that's fine. With soul rescue work, I'm guided by my sort of father in spirit, who's the spirit of the Merlin, who shows himself in various different guises. So he can look like Gandalf the Grey, he can look like Merlin the Magician. If you saw Merlin today on the high street, he's there in Glastonbury all the time. There's a guy that is.
I haven't actually.
He's lovely. You should find him on social media. But he's in a blue wizardry robe with a big pointy hat. And he just gives out free hugs, and he's an awesome human being. And he's just a lovely embodiment of what Glastonbury should be all about. Happiness and positivity. So Merlin will come close, and now working with the energy of the dragons, I'll call some energetic protection with the energy of the dragons, because I think protection is really important. And we journey through guided meditation, but for me it's visualization if I'm working on my own, through a door in the roots of the world tree in Yggdrasil. And we take a spiral staircase down. So it's normally myself, Merlin the Magician, and a wolf called Lupus, who's my sort of spirit animal guide in these realms. And we go down through the spiral staircase. Sometimes we stop off in different levels, soul fragment retrieval, that type of thing is at one level. And when I was doing some soul rescue work, there would be a time when we would be walking across an open plain, very much like I don't know if you've seen Constantine, that sort of Keanu Reeves version.
Yes.
Which is like a big open barren wasteland.
Yes.
And he would be with me, and we'd open up these big doors that were in the earth, and there would be a sort of dark staircase down. And sometimes we take the energy of the dragons through. And he used to do this work with a lovely and very powerful shamanic friend of mine called Shirley Flint, and she had a flaming raven sword, and she would take this down sort of like the way down into these realms. And we did some of the work to help clear the energy of purgatory itself, because we believed that this resting place wasn't where the damned would live or should live, or where people should go if they were, for whatever reason, sent to purgatory or put themselves in purgatory. It was a place that was supposed to be for recuperation and understanding and acceptance of those parts of the self, and then they could be reabsorbed, and then they could move on to the higher realms. But they got stuck in this sort of Catholic miasm of terror and sadness and fear. And because the essence of that realm itself became corrupt by the fear of mankind or humanity that was in it, it was up to humanity to clear those realms. And it's an ongoing thing. I haven't done it for a while, but we spent a lot of time spending energy down there clearing the space. And over time, these realms would reveal courtyards, which would then put energy in so that they would start to grow flowers and shrubs and waterfalls again. And one of my most powerful and most poignant moments was coming through the second level down, and there was this enormous gateway with a huge body of a person there that was screaming and shouting and threatening to tear us and tear us into eternal damnation and that type of thing. And I looked at him for a while, and I could actually see that even though this enormous being was being angry and aggressive, it had these massive nails put through its own body. So it was nailed to this door. And I just thought, you're not here of your own volition. You don't want to be here. Something's put you there. So we spent quite a long time pulling these nails out and releasing the bonds from this being. And when we did, he turned into a being of light and with huge gratitude, and then disappeared off into the higher realms, because he had been forced into this purgatory for eons. Who knows how long this poor soul had been there.
What motivates you to to do this? Where does this driving force come from? Because this is absolutely what you're telling me is so profound. I think you could listen back to this podcast about 5 times over and learn something new every time. I'm gripped, Kieron, but
Thanks, man.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a little quick story about it. I used to share a house with some guys when they worked in the schools, and one of my mates, Ross, who was a PE teacher, a lovely guy, and it was just as my path was unfurling, and he said, Kieron, I need to ask you a question, because he got quite interested in some of the chats we were having. He said, I need to ask you a question. I said, why is that? And he said, well, you're a lovely guy, and you seem to be one of the most spiritual people I know. I said, cool, thanks very much. We were eating pizza and watching Gladiators at the time, or whatever it was, but not very spiritual practices, but I find them.
Oh, I used to love a bit of Gladiators on a Saturday. You can't beat that.
And he said, so why is it that you do workshops and you try and help people when you don't seem to like people very much? and it is unfortunately quite true, because there's quite a lot of aspects of humanity that I really don't like.
Yeah, me too. I feel I've worked in the sales industry for years, and it's I feel more the more I go along this journey. But yeah,
selfishness and greed, that is incredibly embodied at the moment. We're at this cusp of the shifting into different energies between raising the vibration of humanity. So the old guard, if you like, the misogynistic blonde-haired muppets are throwing their weight around, still trying to rule the world, or pretend that they do. And I said to Ross, well, the way I see it is, mate, is that if I can help to release people from that fear or that connection or that obsession over money or the commercial world, then I can try to help to release souls that are trapped in these realms. That'll help to ease the burden of raising the vibration of people and of humanity in general. And the more you raise the energy of humanity across the globe, and we can start to see this now with since 2012, especially with young people coming through whose gender identity is fluid, who's they love the person in the body, not necessarily the body itself. That is an expansion of consciousness, an expansion of love, because they are free with their love. They're not confined by Victorian ideals of man plus woman equals happiness. It is a person that loves a person that is one person that is another person. They love each other. It doesn't matter what else is going on in that equation. That is love, not the condition of a Victorian ideal. I said, if I can remove the anger and the frustration and the sadness and fear, if I can help to rebuild that in some way, or help people to find a better part of themselves and love themselves a little bit more than they did yesterday, then all of humanity over time will start to raise up, and their vibration will start to raise up. So all of these misogynistic, selfish, self-centered dickheads, for want of a better word, I'm not entirely sure if that's okay.
Oh, we don't, there's no filter here. Well, there is on my microphone, but that's about it.
Those people will simply have a choice to change their viewpoint, or to poof out of existence and to be reincarnate as something else, and to carry on their journey in a different way. And so that part of humanity, which I really, really struggle with, will kind of cease to exist, because people will start to be excellent to each other and love each other for who they are, not what they have. And that'll be a much better place to be in my respect, my thoughts.
So interesting. How does everything that you do through all of this spiritual work, how does this affect your life on Earth? How does it affect the way that you live? Because this is all highly profound stuff here. That how does that affect your daily life? What's it? Because it's a lot to process, all of this, even for me sitting here. What does that do for you on planet Earth? What is your life purpose then, I guess?
Well, I think I would like to know that even if it's just one person's life is a little bit better for me having been in it, that's awesome. If I can, in the work that I do lots of soul contract clearing and curse relief, releasing people's curses from past lives.
Oh, let's talk about a bit of that in a minute, actually, because that sounds interesting.
But I just try to help people because I was really sensitive as a kid, and I really struggled for a long, long time. And I still struggle on a daily basis with being here. It's very difficult. It's incredibly difficult at this point of humanity's evolution to be incarnate. So anyone who's energetically sensitive, anyone who is struggling, anyone who just finds the news and everything overwhelming, and this wall of fear, especially when we were in COVID and the whole lockdown thing, this enormous wall of global fear hit me like a tidal wave, and I really struggled for a few months. If we can help to alleviate those symptoms and those problems, then, the world will be a slightly better place. And if the world is a slightly better place, on the microcosmic scale for people that I love and are around me, to the macrocosmic scale for everyone in humanity, then all for the greater good. And I'd like to make people laugh as well. That'd be nice.
You're making me laugh, Kieron. So you're doing a good job there. And when you do the soul clearing, what is a soul clearing? Why would someone need one, and how do you do it?
There's different types. So we may have in past lives, if you believe in past lives, and I do.
I do, yes.
I have some fairly vivid memories, and also with this whole thing of the spiritual journey, it just makes more sense to me if those things exist. Because if they don't exist, I'm just having a really shitty time for no apparent reason. And I'd much prefer there to have been a reason for it. I don't think I've done anything bad in this lifetime particularly, so I'd really like, there to have been a past life thing that I did, like I was a real git, and then that's okay, because then I can start to clear that. So if we believe in past lives, then there may be past lives when we have made contracts. So if we brought up in a convent or a nunnery or as a monk, and we pledge ourselves, they have to go through that pledging of allegiance type thing to devote their life to God or to Jesus or to the Buddha or to Allah or to whoever it is in whatever way it is. In that lifetime, that pledge may be the most important thing that they can do and part of their karmic journey. And that's great. But they will pledge that allegiance and that love for all eternity. So in that lifetime, let's say it's the 14th century, then that lifetime is great. But that will echo through all subsequent lives because we've made that pledge for all eternity.
Wow.
And in a subsequent lifetime, so for me in this lifetime, having had memories of being a monk in past lives when I made declarations of poverty and chastity and that type of thing, there were certain times in my life where I was chaste and I was poor because those soul contracts were still somewhere in my energetic field, somewhere in the back in the back room of my mind. When I would go, cool, I want to make lots of money and I want to be successful, and this little thing would go, actually, I think you'll find that you said in 725 BC that you were going to be poor. So that still applies. And there's this little, karmic accountant sitting on my shoulder saying, no, and I'm afraid you can't be rich, Mr. Morgan, because 1,500 years ago you said that you were quite happy not having any money. So
you're making me laugh with this, but it's I think that you have to use these analogies because it's the way you understand, isn't it?
Well, hopefully, and it's point of having worked in schools for a long time, you have to make people pay attention, to educate them.
You do, yes.
So so we have these little karmic accountants, and they would have this memory of this contract, and I had terrible trouble with my knees. As a young man, did lots of sport, did lots of heavy lifting and carrying and moving, so my knees were fairly knackered. And so when I was doing this stuff, it would go, well, actually, you'll find, you had made this pledge of obedience. So there was a whole lifetime of genuflecting and spending time kneeling at an altar on the cold stone floors, and that gave me arthritis in that lifetime, which then carried forward energetically to this time. It would sort of rumble on a mound. Is this sort of making sense?
Do you know what? Funnily enough, Kieron, it's actually making perfect sense, and you're tying in a lot of what you pick up different things from different places, don't you? But nothing you're saying to me is it's all making sense, and I really hope that is what happens, because if that's not what happens, then how the hell do you explain it? I think you make such a good point. So, but no, carry on. It makes perfect sense to me.
Cool. So that might be sort of soul contracts that we've made. We also may have pledged to an individual of, again, in another lifetime in a Romeo and Juliet sort of way, I will love you for all eternity type stuff. And again, that will echo. And sometimes we have the soulmates that you are supposed to love for all eternity, and they will disappear in several lifetimes, and they'll come back, and that will, a continually big, long love story that goes down the eons. But sometimes we just have people in our lives that are supposed to be there for an amount of time, and we learn lessons from them, and that's it. But if we pledged that fealty for all eternity, it can really bugger things up energetically for subsequent relationships and or lack of relationships. So there's different ways of those types of things. And the last one is samskaras, which are karmic wounds. So I have a very vivid memory of a lifetime when I was one of the druids in Wales when the culling of the druids occurred. And this enormous Roman legionary, who was under strict instructions to murder anyone he could get his hands on, stuck a spear, a pilum, straight through my shoulder.
Wow.
And when I was doing one of my first soul rescue works, I felt this thing, when I was trying to release some of the trapped earthbound spirits, I felt this thing, and my shoulder, my arm basically stopped working physically. And I was in all kinds of problems with it for months and months. And a lovely friend of mine, Lindsay, she said, right, we're going to do a journey. I'm going to find out what's going on with this. And she traced this back to this big Roman legionary, because I didn't know that that's what it was. And she was talking to him. So I'm not necessarily a medium, a survival medium, but I can have conversations with other energies and entities. So I was talking as if I was the Roman legionary, and Lindsay was talking to him through me, sort of thing. And he said, I have to kill them all. I have to kill them all. I have to kill them all. And this one isn't dead yet, which is why this spear is still there. And she took ages to convince him that he'd been lied to about the reasons why he was doing what he was doing. And as soon as he realized this, he pulled the spear out and he screamed, "They shall pay," which meaning his sort of officers in his cohort, and he disappeared off into the light. And I swear as black as white, and whichever deity is up there as my witness, that I could hear the gates of heaven rattling with him trying to get at them.
That's absolutely incredible. When people come to you to have you work with them, what is there kind of like a typical sort of profile of someone that knows that they need this? How do people tend to suddenly discover that they need a soul clearing?
It's sometimes it can become, sometimes it's subtle. So I've had lots of energetic things attached to me because doing soul rescue, I end up doing these things. They sort of latch onto you and they draw your energy away because they want to hold on to the light. They want to survive. And it was something I wasn't aware of, but my energy as a physically would sort of dip down into feeling knackered all the time. Doesn't matter what I ate, how much I slept or didn't sleep, what I did, if I was exercising, being healthy, whatever it was, I would be tired all the time. And so it's very lucky having Ed as my friend and my mentor, and I would go, dude, what's going on with this? And he would tune in, being incredibly clairvoyant and very, very gifted in that area. He would say, right, you've got energies and entities attached. You need to use the violet flame or call upon angelic beings or forces to clear them out of the way. So after a while of doing that, I got used to the way that felt for me. But other people can either exhibit the same symptoms, or they can have repeated patterns of behavior, repeated things of relationships going wrong, or being with the same type of person, and it's sort of going round in circles, if you like. Sometimes it's the building, sometimes it's there's a bit of history stuck there, or that type of thing. But a lot of the time, for people, a lot of time they get referred to me from Ed or from other people, or somebody that's had a clearing from me, and they'll pass by word of mouth, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, well maybe it's a past life contract that you've made, and Kieron can clear that." Sometimes with the soul fragment retrieval, if we've been through trauma in this lifetime or others, parts of our psyche split off. And psychiatrists, adhere to this theory as well, that if you can't deal with the trauma, a bit of your psyche snaps off and it just goes and relives it until at which point you can deal with it.
Wow.
And what I do is sometimes those traumas they just sort of get stuck in a little loop. But sometimes they may not be relevant anymore. They may not be the fear anymore, so I can bring those fragments back. So if you think of like a computer battery or a phone battery that goes from charging to 100% down to 90% or 80%. So your soul is only ever charging up to 80%. You're always going to feel a bit rubbish. If it gets down to 70%, you're going to feel pretty tired all the time. Then you can end up really fragmented. And so what I try to do is get some bits back and then sort of give them back to the energy of the person in this lifetime so they can go from 70% to 75%.
How do you do that?
Well, I a guided meditation where I work with the energy of the Merlin and my spirit
Yes.
Lupus. And I'm not going to go into too many details because everyone will be doing it then.
Yes.
And I'll be out of a job. And, I'll have to go back to...
Well, that's completely fair enough. Kieron, I don't want to steal you of all your trade secrets.
No, I mean, I do offer workshops and things for people to come and learn the process. But it is a process by which we travel down into the shadow realms of that person or those people, or humanity in general. Mm-hmm. And Lupus, bless his little furry socks. I mean, he's enormous.
He doesn't. My intuition is telling me, Kieron, he's not a small dog. No, this isn't a lap dog.
No, this isn't a Chihuahua or a Labrador. This is a big, huge.
Yeah, something that he's probably walking you rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I can't remember what the wolves are in Game of Thrones, but we like to be one of them. I can't remember what their names are.
Oh, it escapes me.
It's one of those, but with bright yellow eyes and black, and he toodles off. So I give him the instructions about who it is and what to get, and I only ever bring back the elements that are ready to be returned, without the trauma, without the pain, without the sadness, but just the parts that are ready to be returned. And I tie around his neck a little pouch, energetically pouch like a crane bag or a medicine bag. Mm-hmm. And he scooches off and he comes back and he has this pouch which is full of little bones. And the bones are these parts of the soul fragment. And then through a little sort of shamanic exercise, I suppose, I imbue those parts back into the energy system of the person, should they wish to receive them. And
do you do this in person and online, or is it? What's the experience?
Most of them are remote, actually.
Okay.
Most of the things I do, so the healing that I do as well, the soul clearing and soul fragment release and past life contracts and things like that is remote. And sometimes people tune in at the same time as I'm doing the work. So we'll say, right, I've got time, Wednesday, 10 o'clock. They go, okay, fine. They sit down somewhere quietly where they're not going to be disturbed in their place. I sit somewhere in mine. We do the work. I'll sometimes get information and stuff, and I write it down. I send a little voice note to say, this is what happened. Sometimes they want to have a chat, on video links and stuff like that. And but other people just want to go, okay, can you just do the work? I'm going to, if you do it on a Wednesday, that's fine. I'm going to go to sleep, wake up and feel better. And so I send the energy with the intent that it happens overnight and they wake up and feel better.
This is absolutely fascinating. If people want to find out more about you, Kieron, where can they go to?
They could go to brotherofdragons.co.uk is my website.
Mm-hmm.
At Brother of Dragons is my Facebook. And at The Brother of Dragons is Instagram.
Thank you so much for coming on to the Soul Sync podcast. It's been a delight and I've learned so much, and I'm sure that you have piqued many people's curiosity very much, Kieron. So thank you for coming on to the show.
You're welcome. Thank you. I can't believe it's all happened already. I've only been speaking 5 minutes.
It's been I wouldn't say it's been an eon, but it's been we could talk for a very long time, but thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Now, I absolutely loved that conversation, and I must admit I was gripped from the start to the end. One thing that you've probably noticed during this conversation is I am significantly louder than Kieron, so I hope that by turning it up to hear Kieron, I haven't managed to deafen you throughout the episode. A big thank you for joining me on another enlightening episode of Soul Sync. If you want to stay in the loop with the Soul Sync podcast, it's easy. Simply hit the follow show button wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts, and by following me, you really are supporting this podcast, as it allows me to continue to get world-class speakers onto the show. If you're enjoying the podcast, could I ask a favour? Please take a moment to leave me a review wherever you tune in. Your feedback really does mean the world to me, and I love reading all of your comments. But most importantly, it makes it easier for others to find and enjoy the Soul Sync. If you want to get involved in the conversation with our community, as well as hearing from me with off-podcast content, look at the bottom of the show notes where you'll find my Facebook page, and you can also sign up to the newsletter function. If you have suggestions for a future episode, or there's a guest you'd love to see featured, or you might even want to be a guest yourself, simply email me at hello@jasonpaulmedium.com. Your stories and ideas are the heartbeat of SoulSync, and your input is invaluable in shaping the soulful conversations I bring to you. I'm Jason Paul. You've been listening to the SoulSync. Until next time, goodbye.